I don't know if I'm gonna make a usual style monthly reading wrap up. I had a little kind of a strange month of reading, and my a lot of my focus has shifted kind of elsewhere. So I thought I'd make another one of these morning in my library videos. I've got the morning off, and I rearranged some stuff. The chair is over here now, and I moved the giant desk into the corner. Um, and I thought I'd talk about, maybe a little bit of what I've been reading and what's sort of been going on here in the home library. I had to rearrange all the stuff in here because I didn't have enough shelf space, and so I added two shelves to each of these of the billies. But in doing so, the size of the shelf decreased to the point that I couldn't just put any book on there. If I take this one, the Netanyahu's, it's not gonna fit in here, So I had to get creative with organizing by size, and so everything has ended up being kind of a mishmash. But I've tried to keep everything more organized alphabetically, and then split by size or by series or publisher. So I've got all my Fitzcarraldos there. My classics are over here, Oxford and then Penguin. All the MYRBs are up there. All of the new directions fit nicely on two shelves here, which is great. And there's a little size disparity between the shelves, so I was able to fit some of my new directions hardcovers here too. This entire shelf has become my Dalkey archive collection, which fits almost perfectly, bar one. Locos has to go sideways at the top. I've sort of arranged standard trade paperback sizes at the top shelf, and then the UK trade paperbacks are smaller, so everything that's a little bit smaller can fit in this shelf. A lot of the books I can get at the Kinokuniya here, they're the UK size, so you see I've got my UK Krasnohorkai book. The top shelves I couldn't make smaller and justify fitting anything, so I've put large paperbacks and books that match the series here but don't fit on the shelves up there. So I've got a hardcover NYRB up there, and my Clarissa for all the Penguins, and my large MYRBs and New Directions. Japanese literature, I put all the Japanese literature at the bottom two shelves here, and it fits pretty nicely. And some of the larger books are at the top. I made this shelf my favorite writers shelf, just to have a place to keep everything that really energizes me in one place. So all my Volman is here, and all of my my Hermann Hesse and Borges, the writers who I really love, and I have a large collection of their books, are here. And at the top again, the large shelf, I just had to put large books up there. So some stray small presses that I like, all my Deep Vellum and Siegel and Exact Change, Quartet Encounters and Tough Poets are up there. And I can get into those in more detail if anyone is interested in another video. These two shelves are not from IKEA, they're a different size. And so this ended up being kind of a loose collection of anything larger that isn't associated with another series or another writer. So I've got my Miss Macintosh, my darling, over here, and some other old hardcovers. Larger, bulky paperbacks are up there too. And then all my knickknacks are up here. I went to this local event for books in Kobe, where all these small publishers and zines were selling their stuff, and some guys I knew were there, and I picked up some cool things. This is a bilingual pen pal type book. These two people were exchanging letters together, and they published them in a bilingual edition, which will be cool to compare. A very native style Japanese would be nice. It was a cool manga anthology. There's some cool stuff in here by writers I like. I really like this writer, Kashiwai. And then this was my buddy's zine, this Neighborhoods of Kobe. Sort of more local style neighborhoods in western Kobe, sort of near the beach where I live. and like local restaurants and public baths and like parks and stuff. It was really cool. And this is also bilingual. So shouts out to these guys. And they were all printed locally too. This is their local printer. This one and this one. I'll give them a shout out. The shelf over here is all of my Archipelago books and other like miscellaneous fiction. This is like like writers who I have a handful of their books, but they don't belong to any of the other series. So like all of my Annie Ernaux is here, and like my William Goyen is here, and all my Archipelago books sort of split, divide these shelves nicely. I put all of my like SF and fantasy at the top here, and then there was just enough space to squeeze in mass markets at the top, which I hadn't realized before. So all of my my Malazan books are up there. The two shelves over here are all still the nonfiction. So this is philosophy and poetry and literary criticism, and here's history and art and science over here. I don't think I've talked about these before. These are my my Monkey magazines. Monkey is cool. They publish writings from Japan, new like poetry and short stories and new translations. They have essays and like stuff about translating and about Japanese culture, and they put out one magazine a year. They're on number 6 now, and these things are just like, they're beautiful to look at. Like I really like number 2. This one, I think this is Taiyo Matsumoto's art, and number 1 has this really like bright, bold green cover. These magazines are really cool, and I look forward to them coming out every year, and I think you can buy them online. You can see here, this is the newest one, 12 more 1-second stories, in-house ghost photos, a no play. Like these magazines are really well produced, and like all of the sort of biggest names in Japanese literature, especially those that are being translated into English, they all appear in these magazines. And they also highlight some sort of lesser known writers. They give a lot of space to translators, and they give a lot of credit to the translators too. I moved my reading chair into the center of the room, and I like surrounded it with all of my smaller bookshelves, and I've put like miscellaneous mass markets here and all of my coffee table books. You can see my giant Jung book is down there. And I really like having these tables as like extended armrests where I can put the books I'm reading now, which are Paradise Lost. I'm doing like a slow read, and I just started book 4. It's 1 book a month for the year, and so I just read book 4 for the first time. And I'm rereading In Praise of Shadows as I'm like re-energized in my Japanese studies and aesthetics and stuff. This book is just an absolute delight, and this edition is so beautiful. This like special edition from Vintage, which unfolds like this. It's like a faux dust jacket. It's like all attached, and inside is like beautifully illustrated. Like all these books are great. Like I can't imagine owning a different copy of this book. So that's what I'm reading now. And then books I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about getting to these ones soon. Steiner and My Name is Red, and the next Emile Zola book. And I've also been making my way through Impressionism by Robert L. Herbert, which seems to be like the one book you really need if you want to get like a big picture view of Impressionism and French society at the time. It seems to be what is most recommended. You can get a nice view of my my mass markets over here, and I just picked up this one, this Tale of Genji in 2 parts. I think when I reread Genji, I'm going to read it in this edition. A lot of my reading time recently, I've been spending with these Japanese graded readers, which now I'm reading one about Japanese food, but they've got them about these stories from Osamu Dazai and Ryunosuke Kutagawa and Botchan in 2 parts by Natsume Soseki. But these have been reduced to like beyond the point of like having any artistry, you know. So I'm hoping to level up. I got like the same like matching books in a level higher, and I think these are like I think these are like, if you ever read those like illustrated classics when you were a kid, and they came in like the white hardcovers with the red letters on the spine, and every other page was a picture. I think this is like that level of these stories. So I'm hoping to read these ones and then like sort of graduate into the next level. A lot of my reading time has been spent on that in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I always do the March of the Mammoth challenge. I always read a really large book in March. And this year I read Abel and Cain by Gregor Von Rezzori, which, if you've been watching my videos, you know I've been looking forward to reading this book. And I really loved An Ermine and Chernobyl when I read it a couple of years ago. Long story short, this book was pretty disappointing for me, but that is not for a lack of ambition and interesting ideas. There's just a lot going on in here. It's one of these books that's about a writer who is writing a book about writing within a book about writing, And this struggle with ambition is kind of at the heart of the book here, because the main character of this book is a writer named Aristides Siglitz. What is it? The writer's name is Aristides something with an S. I can't remember. His name doesn't come up that much in the book because we're sort of being fed everything through his perspective. But it's very clearly like a stand-in for Rezzori, who has a similarly sort of checkered history. He was born in a territory that has just changed hands, and so the country that he was born in has not existed like twice-fold. It's like changed hands multiple times in his life, and this is the same situation our narrator is in. And so the narrator is living in France in the 60s, and he's writing this book about his history as a German or Austrian, or there's all this stuff about like the death of Europe and stuff, and the new city, the new city of man, Anthropolis, like this dead European past and this new European future. All of it is in the neuroses of our narrator too, and so you get the sense that Rezzori's putting a lot of himself into this narrator. The narrator is also struggling as a writer, and he is writing films, like film scripts on the side, which is something that Rezzori did. He starred in movies too, or I don't know if he starred, but he appeared in a lot of German movies, and he wrote a lot of movies, like French movies with like Brigitte Bardot, I think, was in his movies and stuff. So we're clearly getting like a almost like an I-novel, like some sort of warped version of Rezzori's own mind and thoughts here. And so we're getting this Germanic strife and anti-strife battle, which really ties back to Faust and the sort of literary tradition of German literature following Faust. This is Faust's main thing, right? The striving for more and never being satisfied and wanting more and more and more. Rezzori / our narrator is wondering whether or not it's worth dealing with the strife at all, whether it's worth pursuing literature at all. He's very aware that he has this idea for a massive book, and he knows it's never going to live up to the sort of generation that came before him. So there's this constant not insecurity, but sort of a feeling that all of this writing is sort of fruitless. This book is also like 4 different books. There's like a main section, which is sort of the main text is like 250 pages. And then there are 3 books of notes, book A, book B, and book C. And book C is what Cain is. So Abel, The Death of My Brother Abel by Gregor Von Rezzori came out in the 80s. And it mentions in the book that this writer has 3 books of notes, books A, B, and C. And book C is not included in the original Death of My Brother Abel. It was published posthumously as Cain. This is book C, and they've all been collected here. But book C is delivered as kind of a within universe, like posthumous release of drafts and notes. The writer of the notes, the writer of this book has died since in like a car crash, and we get these notes posthumously. Rezzori sort of predicted his own fate there, which is pretty interesting. I've talked about this book for like 6 minutes now or something, and I haven't even like really touched like what it's about. Um, there's so much going on here. His relationships with prostitutes, his experience of the Anschluss. He was in Vienna when Hitler sort of returned there as the leading the Third Reich, and he considers this like the his first death, like the death of the first half of his life. And then from here we're in this like strange rebuilding period he calls the Ice Age. And then there's this sort of reemergence with currency reform in the late 40s, and Germany's sort of back on the up, and he's making movies and writing and stuff. He repeats the same things over and over and over, but it's so scattered, and it's not in order, and you're piecing together this timeline as you go. And I found it a little frustrating to read, honestly. Which is not to say there isn't like a ton of like literary excellence here. There's some really, really good stuff. And I was trying to put my finger on why I didn't like this book as much as I liked, for example, Proust, or for example, The Man Without Qualities. And I think, which by the way, I think The Man Without Qualities is a great analog for this book. If you've read The Man Without Qualities, it similarly has like an unfinished second part, and it is similarly pieced together, and you sort of like the thread of time is sort of lost during the course of that book. So that's a good comparison for this. But I was wondering why I didn't vibe with it as much, and I think it's just like Rezzori was born in 1919, and so he's like one generation or two generations later than all of these guys, Proust and Musel and Kafka. And there's just like an added level of modernity to his awareness, to his psyche, this sort of perception of perception, this sort of layers of influence there. His references are more modern. He talks about the Beatles and Arnold Schwarzenegger in this book. And so it's like straddling these two things. This is like attempting to be a bridge between the modernist classics of the 20s and 30s and sort of our more postmodern ideas now. It's a very strange bit of writing. I think the original Death of My Brother Abel came out in the 80s. I think it was in 76. So the Death of My Brother Abel comes out in 76, and Cain came out in 2000. Yeah, I don't know. Something strange about it. The other book that I've seen this compared to is The Tunnel by William Gass, which is also about a writer writing a book about something else, I haven't read The Tunnel, and I'm planning to get to it one of these days. I don't know, if you've read The Tunnel by Gass, maybe this is something similar if you're looking to scratch that itch. This thing took me like 2 weeks to read, and it was so dense and challenging that I sort of forget a lot of it like wiped me clean of the stuff I had read earlier in the month. And I read some books that I know I really, really enjoyed and I wanted to talk about. But it sort of wiped a lot of that stuff clean. And in this time, I was like frustrated reading, and I was looking for something else to do in my time. And so I started I got re-energized to start my Japanese studies again. So this book was like a transition into like a more studious time for me. And so I'm still reading, and I'm still enjoying what I'm reading, but a lot of my mental focus has shifted towards studying Japanese. The books I read before Abel and Cain, which my memory is not so clear on. I read After Rain by William Trevor, which are short stories, and I remember these stories are excellent. These are some perfect stories. They're just the right length. They're all about 20-ish pages. He develops his ideas so clearly. There are these really unique bits of inspiration You know, the sort of beats of these stories are so interesting. I thought these were perfect stories. And this was my first time to read William Trevor, who's like a legend of Irish literature. And I don't know what he's most famous for, but this one had been recommended to me somewhere. And I was so happy to read this one. I also read The Ship of Fools by Christina Perry Rossi, and not this one, and Oranges by John McPhee, which I had talked about in my last video on Seiz Nooteboom and Jacques Poulain. This book, Oranges, is literally about oranges. It's like 1960s reportage. He's a journalist and he goes down to Florida. He interviews a lot of like the main producers of oranges and what it looks like, how they add color and the different kinds of oranges. But the most interesting parts for me here were like the history of oranges and their like sort of gradual migration to the West. The like literary references and historical points are really interesting. And this one, The Ship of Fools, this book was rad as hell, but it was also very strange, and the strangeness of it and the strangeness of Abel and Cain just like completely wiped each other out. And I'm kind of foggy on the details of this book. There's a guy named X. His name is X, and he's living X. He's like a traveler. He's like an expat, which is similar to Christina Perry Rossi, who was exiled from Uruguay in the 70s. So this guy's like traveling around and he's meeting strange people, and there's this like extended like allegory of this like island where there's like no people, and they're like, I can't remember it. I just can't remember, you know? I didn't take enough notes. Interspersed here, we have these italicized descriptions of like a medieval tapestry, and it's going over every detail of this tapestry in like incredibly fine detail, like a Georges Perec or something of a Oulipo. Like it's very, very detailed. I found myself really like enjoying this book. It was really entertaining, and the sort of postmodern experimental elements I thought were very beneficial to the book. They weren't distracting or off-putting. They didn't like take attention away from what I think is a really great book. But I did a bad job taking notes of this one. I was sort of on a roll with my reading. I thought I was doing a good job, and I just didn't take any notes, and I blew it. And I'd like to read this one again and talk about it more, because I think this is an interesting book and a really interesting writer. I also read Washington Square by Henry James, which I thought was pretty good. The character here, Catherine Sloper, there are these two people, her father and her like suitor, are kind of like competing with each other over her, and both of them are not doing any justice to her throughout the book. And the sort of female perspective here is I think quite nice, and I think it's something that James is known for and is sort of like perfecting throughout his career. This is pretty early on for him. I'm still reading James. I still really like Henry James, and I will continue to read his stuff this year and talk about them in the future. And to sort of decompress after Abel and Cain, I read this book, The Turk, which is like a nice bit of light popular nonfiction about this chess-playing automaton, which I thought was a little overlong. I mean, it was interesting. Lots of detailed history about this machine and its inventor and its travels, but a little overlong to sort of play up the sort of historical detective story mode, this idea that the writer here is going for, Tom Standage. But it was fun. I've had this book around forever, and I'm happy I read it. It was interesting, and definitely, I mean, it cured whatever blues I had from Abel and Cain. This was just like back into my normal reading rhythm. That's The Turk. Lastly, as a kind of a tease, I have this like secret hiding attic space, and this is where I've put all of my manga. So I'll go up there and give you a quick look at that. There's probably over 1,000 volumes up here. Let's see. So yes, that's all over here. If anyone's interested in me, coming up here and poking around, pulling out some titles, and talking about what buying manga is like in Japan, I'd be happy to do so, and I'm hoping to do something like that before it gets too unbearably hot up here. So yeah, anyone interested, just let me know. I'd be happy to do that. And thank you so much for watching.